Hello, and thank you for joining us now at the Choose Faith Now podcast. I am here, Michael, with my co-hosts, Angela and Julie, and we're really excited today because one of the themes that the three of us have been discussing recently was the principle of being still but not staying still. And so, and its benefits both and perspective both in our personal lives and also its spiritual applications. And so I'm just curious as we start talking about this, Angela, like what does that even mean to be still?
Well, I have talked to Michael quite a bit about this, and I'm pretty passionate about this topic, this being still but don't stand still, because being still is very different than standing still. We are taught in the scriptures to be still in order to find peace. So we do still want to be still. We want to take the time to ponder, to think through things, to collect our thoughts, maybe to study. But there's a difference between being still in that regard and standing still as far as making forward progress in either our spiritual growth or in our life. So I have a couple sentences I'm going to read you that I wrote, just a short, like, page and a half article, I guess you could say, on this a few years ago. And what I wrote in it was this: while we are taught and understand that the ability to receive personal revelation can increase if we be still, its purpose is not for you to stand still. Like tribulation, revelation is meant to propel us forward, to create movement, personal growth, and change. So I want to ask you two, there's more to being still and not standing still than just the spiritual component of our lives. It truly has an effect in a lot of different facets. So what are your thoughts on that concept? How do you see it?
Well, I can say it like this, for instance. I and maybe to start off by melding the two, because this is just my thoughts. Like, I have a journal that I specifically use for personal revelation. And so if I'm just going to a peaceful place or I'm going to the temple, then I'll take it with me and I try to take it with specific questions. And that's one of the things that it says, specific questions, you and then there's a place for the personal revelation. You also write, gratitude stuff, but then at the end, you write what was revealed to you, but then you also say, what are the next steps that I need to take? So I see that as a standing still at the beginning, and even talking in this journal about what am I doing to be still, and then the action part at the end. And so, but here's maybe this is where it's leading back to yours, is that so many of the things that I search for revelation on are not necessarily spiritual. I mean, they have spiritual components, but I'll just to mention one right now. I'm in a relationship, and we've had quite a bit. We've discussed it, some personal revelation, each of us individually about it, and we're at that place like, what does this even mean? We don't understand. Like, and what do we do with this information? And so we take that and we can write that down in the revelation part, and then but don't have an answer to the next step forward. So I just think that's once you have that component, that's where it comes into the not standing still part. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So as you talk about next steps, I actually have a file on my computer, and it's titled to-do list, and it's just in the main folder, and I update that file almost every single day, and it's categorized. It's outline format, and it's all categories of my life. So there's a category that is religion, and that's like my religious spirituality tasks that I'm working on or that I need to get done. There's medical, there's each of my corporate rentals, they each have their own little bullet point. There's this podcast, it has a bullet point. So all of these different things that I do in my life, I find if I keep track and know the next steps of things that I should be working on, there's less chaos in my life. So as you were talking about personal revelation, and that a lot of times it's not just necessarily spiritual things you're asking about, I think a lot of times when we're seeking personal revelation, it's because there's something in our life that we aren't sure what to do and we're struggling with. And they're very often secular things. And so, and they do have religious components because in an innate sense, that's what drives our choices. But I think in our electronic society, we have our phones, we have email, we have our computers, we have AI now, we have all these things that we try to use to manage our lives. But for me, the true thing that really just brings me to center and kind of blocks everything out and helps me be still is good old-fashioned paper and pen. I put my computer away. I take everything off my desk that doesn't need to be on there. And I sit down with a blank piece of paper, contemplating the thing that I feel like I need to move forward on. And I start to write down either the tasks associated with it. And I usually pray first. So I write down the tasks that come to my mind that I know are associated with it, or ideas of things that I could do, or just thoughts that come to my mind on it. And then I take that information and I transfer it to the to-do list. And I am amazed how the difference in my day, if I don't print my to-do list and I just think, oh, I kind of remember off the top of my head what I'm supposed to do today, and I'll kind of get it done. I don't get it done. I don't get nearly as much done. I don't even get half as much done. And I don't feel stillness that day. It actually feels a little bit chaotic, like I'm jumping from thing to thing to thing, but oh, I forgot this thing, and oh, I forgot this thing, and oh shoot. And I just find I don't feel still. So you can move and be moving forward and not standing still, and be still in a sense at the same time, and that you have the inner stillness of your spirit and your emotions while you're moving forward. And I guess that's kind of how I process my day. That gives you a window into Angela's brain, I guess. Julie, what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, I have a lot.
Oh, let's hear it.
No doubt it's all good.
Well, first of all, this is going back to things that you said it early on, is that being still is having peace, is the desire, like the commandment to be still is to have that peace. And I think a lot of times it's not just about pondering and praying and getting that revelation. I think a lot of times, especially in this world, we have so much stress and anxiety that we deal with. And I think part of the commandment of being still is to let go of all of that stress and worry and trust in the Lord.
So,
because the rest of that is be still and know that I am God. So there's that trust piece. Right. So it's not just the revelation piece and action piece. So, but I also think when you can calm that nervous system and get to the point where you do have a stillness, then it allows you to move forward. Because when you're in a fight or flight or freeze, right, you're not able to move forward. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's so interesting how this perspective and your perspective are like parallel, mm-hmm, right? Because if you are not pondering and praying and seeking that revelation, it does impede your progress forward, like you were saying. And if you don't have that order, you're kind of, your day's a little more chaotic. And the same thing with if you're experiencing anxiety or stress, that keeps you from moving forward as well, and it keeps you just kind of spinning in this circle. I also want to say that we talked about secular things. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to remember that especially if you, as you're striving to become like Christ and you're striving to improve on a regular basis, everything has that spiritual element, which both you and Michael said, is that everything has a spiritual element to it. So sometimes we discount things that aren't churchy as not spiritual, but even doing yard work has a spiritual element to it. Even taking care of your properties has a spiritual element to it. And I just always want to keep that in the forefront of my mind.
Mhm.
I had other thoughts, but they're gone now. So
Yeah. Well,
Maybe we can come back.
there was one thing, Julie, and I actually, Angela and Julie, you both alluded to this. And so going back to like this, when I talked about taking this journal when I go to the temple, there's two things that are coming to my mind as I'm doing this. One, I leave my cell phone in the car, or I try to. Just because it's a distraction, that way I'm not pulling it out and I'm not saying, oh, did somebody text me back, or do I need to respond to this Facebook notification or whatever. And then I take that journal and a pen and I leave it open. Like if I'm just sitting outside in the grounds, I open it up to that page and I put my pen there, and then I wait for the revelation. And of course, the temple being just a quiet place, and for some of our viewers, listeners, that this doesn't mean if you're not able to go inside the temple, you can still go on the temple grounds. That's what I've done many times.
Mhm.
And still be eligible for that revelation, that same and peace and stillness. And something I've noticed, it's anywhere on earth, that is the easiest place to be still, because it's quiet. There's very few distractions. And even times when I've had the distractions, they've been actually to my benefit, because I was still and I was able to kind of like be present in that. So my thoughts, actually, I guess, as I'm thinking about that last little part, do you think that stillness equals being present, or is there like a difference?
No, I think stillness has a lot of different facets, but I think you're right on that. That you, if you focus and put some mental energy into it, not to the level that it's causing you stress, but just say, this is going to be my focus for these few moments. I am absolutely going to second your comment, Michael, on going on the temple grounds even if you cannot go inside, because I'm going to tell you an experience that I had this was about 3 years ago now.
Mhm.
And I was going down to Salt Lake, and I had this really, really strong feeling that I needed to go to the Salt Lake Temple. Now, I forgot it was under construction and it wasn't open. I was coming down from Idaho. So I went to Salt Lake and I got there. It was November, so it was really cold, and I don't do well when it's really cold outside. But I thought, I know I'm supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to go. So I went, parked, got out, and of course you could see the scaffolding and the construction walls all around the temple. So I couldn't go inside, but I was on the temple grounds. And I had had an incredibly tumultuous week. It was the week that I had left home. And so I remember sitting down on a bench outside the temple, and I just sighed and I just said out loud, I just needed to come down here and find my center. And almost audibly, it was so loud and clear in my mind. I heard a voice I have never heard before. I still to this day can hear that voice and what he said in my mind. And what I was told was, you are here. This is it. This is your center. And in that moment, I knew that that spirit was telling me the temple was my center. And that was such a huge thing for me. That was a huge thing for me. And I thought, okay, I can do this, but I have to start with rearranging my life now, with the centerpiece being the temple. And so that's what I did. But I didn't do it. It didn't happen inside the building. It happened outside with workers and scaffolding and construction walls. But the fact that I was still, I was still, I was quiet. I wasn't moving. I was just sitting on the bench pondering when it came to me, but I was present in the moment. So yeah, I think you're right that there is really something to being present in that moment.
So Julie, what do you think about this then too? About the whole idea of like maybe not even being at the temple, but like writing down personal revelation or keeping track of that too.
Well, I agree with both you and Angela with about paper and pen. I actually, this is not an endorsement. I do not get paid for this, but I purchased, um, I'll
I
say
I
I
do,
purchased
I do,
a
but she's just
tablet.
taking a hit for me.
I won't even say which tablet I used, but I purchased a tablet that allows me to write electronically. And so that because I lose paper often, and so it keeps my notes, but it still allows me to do that act of writing. And um, I oftentimes do what is known as prayer journaling, because oftentimes if I just try to pray, even out loud, my brain goes all over. And so I will write my feelings and how my questions and like what is on my heart, and then I'll wait and I'll listen and I'll write the impressions that come afterwards. So that keeps me on track, and oftentimes that makes for a very long prayer session with the Lord, but they're the most effective ones that I'm able to have, because I'm actually able to focus and be in the moment and know that I am getting revelation and hearing the voice of the Lord.
I love
Really,
that.
I love that because I do that, but I didn't know there was a special name. I didn't know it was called prayer journaling. But you're right. I get great answers when I do that. Plus, here's the advantage. You have them to go back and read later. And that has been so helpful for me. Michael, what's your thought?
No, I'm just saying I need to do that.
Oh,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
all
because I
for
have
it.
the personal inspiration journal, and that I do pray about that ahead of time and for guidance, but I don't sit there actually like in, well, I mean, I kind of guess I do. I think it looks a little bit different, but it's more me praying and then all right, and then maybe I'll say another prayer, but it's not a continuous process, maybe like the two of you are talking about.
Uh-huh.
And for
So
me, I find that it's more real, because when I am doing that, I'm not just saying, and please bless this, and please bless that, and thank you for this, and thank you for that. Like
it's not the
we
rote
don't
thing.
get really intimate in our prayers that we say publicly. And so even in my family prayers, um, I struggle to share all of the things on my heart, partly because I'm trying to protect my kids, but also because it is vulnerable to do that in a public setting. But in my prayer journaling, I am much more vulnerable and open about what's really going on with me with the Lord. And so he's more willing to talk, not more willing, I shouldn't say that, but I'm more open to hearing what he has to say.
Actually, I have a thought on that more willing thing. Because I have told many of people, I have recommended, I tell them, if that maybe they'll have an experience and they know it's a spiritual experience, and they'll tell me and they'll say, I had the coolest thing happen the other day, and they tell me, and I'm like, the first thing I say is, did you write that down? Like, I would recommend you write it down, because they're so excited about it, but they'll forget about it later.
Yep.
But when they get that look on their face, it's like, oh, I guess I never thought about it. I don't really write things like that down. I tell them, like, my experience on that has been that I do believe the Lord is more willing to give us more personal revelation if we will take the time to write it down, because that is an act of acknowledgement.
uh,
I really, really believe that from what I've seen from my personal experience. If I acknowledge it to the Lord and I am willing to say, I know this was from you, to the point that I'm going to take the time and the energy to write this whole thing down, that is acknowledging to him, this is important enough to me and I'm grateful enough for this, that I'm going to do that. And I do see that I get more personal revelation that is more specific when I take the time to write down what I've been given.
I absolutely agree. And I really appreciate that. That was awesome. And I think you're right on in that.
But all these things, I mean, what Julie's talking about, Michael, the things you've talked about that I've talked about, the revelation, the tasks, the writing things down, it in essence is us wanting to move forward in our lives in some way, whether it's a topic about investment, our kids, our jobs, just spiritual religion in general. We are taking the time, we're having that focus because we want to move forward. We either want some kind of guidance, and that is the part that is us not standing still. That is us being active in our choices and in our lives and playing an active role in the Lord's plan for us. And that's what he expects of us. He doesn't want us to just sit there and wait for everything to be handed to us. He doesn't want us to stand still. He wants us to be active and to work towards our future with him, and not just rewards in this life, but eternal rewards. Because sometimes that focus is an eternal focus, and we're making choices and moving forward because we want the eternal reward that we know that comes with it. So I honestly, you guys, I could go on forever.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
You're just gonna have to be like, Angela, zip it, because I am so passionate about this topic of finding your motivation and your desire and sitting down and taking the time to say, okay, I'm going to come up with a plan, or I'm going to acknowledge what I've been given, and I'm going to make choices, and I'm going to move forward because I want to improve who I am in some regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's totally do that. Another podcast about finding our motivation. And I think that's a really important topic. So
I think that's beautiful that you started it out with being still and not standing still, because so often we don't start this process with being still. We start it with, okay, I gotta go, I gotta get going, I gotta do this and everything. And so I love how you reminded us to start it with being still, and then don't stand still.
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
and you can even I mean, this really was just a beautiful discussion that I'm so grateful, because and even as just looking at it, I think, wow, I have so much that I can do to this. And it's not one of those being hard on myself. It's one of those gratitude for learning so that I can do better. So thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, just Angela, for bringing this subject up, that we can discuss it, and really ways that we can improve, because that's what it is. We're all human. We just need to be patient with ourselves and continue to learn. And that's why we do this podcast, is so that we can learn and grow. And so thank you so much, Julie, for your thoughts. And again, especially Angela, thank you for bringing up this subject with us. Don't forget to follow and like and share this podcast, as well as any comments we love hearing. So thank you so much. Have a great day.